I get asked a lot, why do I talk about the things that I do on YouTube? It would seem like they wouldn't necessarily go together, things like Venezuela, Antarctica, the USS Fitzgerald. The reason I talk about them is those are things that we could do something about, and we did. I do firmly believe that the reason all charges were dropped against the commanders of the Fitzgerald and the McCain had to do with the information put out by this channel and the help of other channels disseminating that information. I also believe that with the help of other channels as well, we made a difference in Venezuela. As far as Antarctica goes, I think it's pretty clear that we've shown things that no one else saw. And people are going to be looking at it in a very different light for a long time. Now, regarding the current situation with this coronavirus, over a year ago we were talking about this coming plague. And while at the time, the Ebola, quote-unquote, virus that they were talking about was very, very similar to this, I think they found a way to rename it. Or it's morphed. Because they have talked about this virus is an RNA virus that continues to adapt and evolve. Now, as far as everyone bringing me information from the quote-unquote old gods of YouTube, meaning this garbage about Bill Gates or this garbage about Canada or about patents, not going to allow it. Because where were all of those old gods a year ago? Where were all of those YouTube religion purveyors 2 years ago? They were nowhere talking about anything like this. In fact, a lot of them were laughing at me. I'm going to refrain from using their names, but you know who they are. I don't want to hear it. Because they're full of it up to their ears. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they have no idea what truth is. Doesn't matter what the press says, doesn't matter what the politicians or the mobs say, doesn't matter if the whole country decides that something wrong is something right. This nation was founded on one principle above all else, the requirement that we stand up for what we believe. No matter the odds, the consequences, when the mob and the press and the whole world tell you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree next to the river of truth and tell the whole world, no, you move. Other than basic precautions that you would use to keep from getting the flu, keep from getting the measles, keep from getting Ebola or whatever else, there's probably very little that you can do to stop this virus from doing anything in your neighborhood. You may end up getting it anyway. You can only do what you can do. But there are things out there you can do things about. I have been watching this girl, Tulsi Gabbard, for a while, and it dawned on me exactly who she is now. In the upper left here, I have this picture. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this concept of what they call a placeholder in these role-playing games. An NPC, non-player character. You see, in 2016, they had a problem. They had two incredibly bad candidates, and they had a whole bunch of people in this country that wanted to do something different. So they had to convince people that they were doing something different when really they were doing the same thing. So Tulsi Gabbard is to 2020 what Trump was to 2016. See, she's still a D. She's still part of the system. But she's that rebel placeholder that all of these people now want to, they're so disenfranchised with the quote-unquote establishment D that they want to feel like they're voting for something different. They're rebelling. They're standing up to the man, so to speak. And that's her job, to be that person, to funnel those votes to her, but keep them inside the quote-unquote D fence, just like Trump did. Everybody thought they were doing something great, voting for disturbance in the force. Where we go one, we go all, and you still just got the R. You got a guy who's defending Bill Clinton, said he shouldn't have been impeached. A guy who wants to take your guns first, due process second. Best friend the Chinese ever had. Placeholders. See, this is the person right here in the lower right. You'd have to be probably somebody familiar with the World of Warcraft story to understand who Jaina Proudmoore was. She even has the little skunk line in the hair, too. It's just white and blonde instead of black and white. She has kind of a colorful history, just kind of Tulsi does. I'm not going to waste your time, but that's pretty much who she is. That's who she's playing. And they have to keep people not thinking. Because there's a logic flaw here that not a lot of people are seeing. See, I get a lot of people that also say, you really think your vote matters? Really? It didn't matter in 2016? Those of you that thought that you did something in 2016 would have to really ask yourself a question. If voting doesn't matter, then nothing happened. Nothing changed in 2016. At all. Just another establishment, just another day at the office. But then if you did do something in 2016, then voting does matter. And you could make a difference. It's not going to work as a cop-out this time. See, there's a problem the left has, or excuse me, a problem the right has that the left doesn't. On the right, those voters, and I've mentioned this before, and I think it's important to talk about. People who vote conservatively normally do not act emotionally right off the bat. They like to see themselves as thinkers. People that don't just knee-jerk react to things like young people do. See, the left doesn't have that problem. All of their voters are emotional reactors. They're young. They're low information. That's why they talk in memes. That's why they talk in emojis. That's why you hear people these days say, how do you feel about that? Instead of, what do you think about that? A lot of people have missed that change. It used to be, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? That's not how people talk these days. It's how do you feel about that? It's very disconcerting and off-putting to anyone who's ever been a thinker. But the point is this. How do you get people, older people, into an emotional state while simultaneously making them believe they're still thinking instead of feeling? What you do is you get guys like Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, and all the little hot babes at Fox to start running Psyops, and we've talked about it ad nauseum. But this is what they're going to start to ramp up doing now. That whole vote against thing. They're going to have you vote against your own interest, vote against your own mind, vote against every logical thought you've ever had because of how you feel. Group loyalty, faulty reasoning, just factually wrong information, and background beliefs. Because that's easy. The circle people get into. No one else has a chance, therefore we're going to do this or this, and then make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. Which then, of course, means you surrender to the system. Don't surrender to the system. If you can't vote for a third party, don't vote. I'll say it again, don't vote. You will be part of the problem because the logic fails. It doesn't make sense to even the most basic fundamental laws of logic to do the same thing over and over and over and over again, regardless of how many deck chairs you rearrange on the Titanic. It doesn't change what's happening. And a lot of people are like, why don't you talk about something important? This is. In 9 months, we have an opportunity to do something different. And maybe what I say will matter, and maybe it won't. But in 3 different occasions, I think I can make a pretty strong argument that what we've done here at this channel has made a difference in the real world. It may not ultimately fix things, but if this channel has a legacy, I want it to be that. That whatever we did, whatever we talked about, whatever efforts we made, actually had an effect in the real world. We can change things. If you believe that, we can change things. If you believe that in 16 you did something that disturbed the force, you can do it again. If you don't believe that, then don't vote. Either way, it's a win-win. But anybody who believes they can't do anything about anything and it's all predetermined, but then yet goes and pulls a lever for an R or a D, is literally a fool to a fool. And that's the game they're playing with the left right now. Because they're young and they're ignorant. And if you could do anything in your life right now, it would be to maybe bring a young person in and say, look, I know I'm an older person and you're a younger person and I see the world differently than you do. And you may want to think that these people over here, the blue, the D, that there's some kind of solution. Trust me, even when I was young and our parents were young, they thought the same thing. And we were wrong, they were wrong, I was wrong, and you are wrong because they're playing the same game. And educate them about what happened in the 80s, what happened in the 90s, how they did this over and over and over again. And say, look, if you don't want to vote, that's great. But if you do, don't vote for an R or D under any circumstances. Because $23 trillion in debt, if you do the math on that, even just going back 100 years, that's $230 billion a year. Tell me again how capitalism works. Just think if you could take, a few zeros off that. What if you could go into debt $230,000 a year every year for 100 years and then say, yep, my life worked out. Whatever financial decisions I made, that worked out. But then you left that debt to your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And we have a chance to fix things. Vote third party or don't vote. Like, share, subscribe.